All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, DC Shorts Night 3. Thank you for, or Day 3. Thank you for spending your night with us. So tonight we have a very, very special spotlight on this gentleman right here, Mr. J. Jamison. Let's give him a hand.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Finally, it has come. We're here. It's nighttime. We're in DC. We're here to have some fun. We're going to keep it loose. I'll ask you some serious and very non-serious questions. I don't know what I'm going to say.
That's
great.
Who
really knows?
That's great. That's how we roll, Joe.
That's how we roll. So let's be honest. So a lot of times with all your films.
All of my films.
All your films. Okay. Maybe majority of your films. I don't know. Okay. Even but on this last clip of so the people at home who didn't see this, we watched a retrospective. We just watched retrospective of Jay's work. And one of the things I noticed at the very end was your voice.
Yeah.
Your little cameo there.
That is my cameo. As the reader.
So this is the thing. Is that something that you actually do in as much of your work as possible? Do you have a cameo in every one of your films? Though I said everything, is it true?
I wouldn't say every film, but I do throw myself in there occasionally. Like for Slave Cry, so we recorded her voiceover before, we actually filmed on the day, and I was just there to kind of read opposite that actress as she was kind of doing it. And it was going to just be Tim. But it was one of those things where it's like, as I played it through in the edit, I was like, this actually works really well because it's just so, monotone. The way readers are is so monotone and such a sharp juxtaposition to the way that she's kind of over acting that, or really putting her all into that role that, I was like, it would be a cool cameo for me too. So but yeah, the feature I did, I have a little cameo in a montage. And then some of the early stuff. But I try to stay behind the camera as much as possible. I don't fancy myself an actor at all.
So, here's one thing I've never actually asked you. We've done many shows together. To be quite honest with the world, this isn't the first time we met.
Yeah. Yes. But I've known Joe for 18 plus years. 18
plus years, yeah. And finally we're here. Yes. I haven't seen you for a while. This is the first time I've seen you since since the world went sick.
Yeah.
So it's very good to see you.
You too.
I've never asked you this.
Okay.
What was the first moment in which you realized you wanted to be a filmmaker? Was it like a movie that you saw? Because I remember before we started, I think, was it Anthony Samuels?
Yes.
The night before, you were like, we need to watch this movie. This is the movie that I watched before we make everything. And it was Finding Forrester.
Yep.
But that can't be the first movie that inspired you. Was there another movie before that?
Finding Forrester is the movie that made me want to make movies.
Oh, awesome.
It wasn't the movie that I loved cinema. I loved storytelling. Going back to my OG original movie that I watched all the time was American Tail. Fievel Goes West.
Yes.
I had
somewhere out there.
Somewhere out there.
I had the stuffed animal.
I had that VHS, and we had a little conversion van with a VHS player and a TV in the back. Yes. And my parents would throw me in the back of that van and just put that tape on and drive all over the place. And I was cool. I was just Fievel over and over again.
That's a serious movie.
It is very scary.
He got separated from his family,
and that cat.
Yeah,
it's scary. But that was the first kind of. But no, the movie that made me want to make movies was Finding Forrester. I remember seeing it at this theater that is now a Gold's Gym in Richmond. But I went with my uncle, and I was 15 at the time. I wanted to be a novelist. I always loved storytelling. I always loved writing, and it was this kind of confluence of events. I went to that theater. I saw that film, and I saw myself on screen for the first time, a young black kid who was a writer, who was kind of misunderstood, who was living between worlds, who just wanted to express himself. And I remember I was moved to tears. I was just inconsolable. When it ended, I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. And around the same time, I went to this film camp that was at New Millennium Studios in Petersburg, Virginia, that was run by Tim and Daphne Reed. And the film camp was taught by Todd Rabiota, who a lot of us here know. And so those kind of two things happening concurrently, where it was seeing the power of what the medium could do and how it could connect with people and represent people and just really on an emotional, visceral level. And then going to this film camp and learning what it meant to make films and collaborate with other filmmakers and bring their ideas into the fold and create something that's better than the sum of its parts. And so those two things kind of came together, and I just started I fell in love with film and started making films.
Did you have any sort of like adversity against it at first? Because when, I actually haven't ever asked you about, growing up, like how your high school, were you surrounded by other like creatives? Did you have other kids that like, oh, you can be a filmmaker? Did you have anyone actually that said that's even a possibility?
So I went to that film camp where Todd Rabiota was like the kind of the lead, like he ran that camp from the like educational standpoint.
Is this okay? What age were you at that point?
I was going into my junior year of high school, so I was like 15, 16.
Oh, okay. So I guess that is the high school. Yeah, that's high school.
It was high school. And then that following semester, Todd wound up teaching film at my high school. And so it was like this kind of weird thing of like, he's
following you around.
He's following me around. Like, you got to do the film. And so there were some other filmmakers that were in school, and they were like a lot of really good, filmmakers, really talented folks. But yeah, no, I think for me, the key moment was, we were talking about earlier, was finding Project Res. It was finding an outlet. Project Res, for those who don't know, was a monthly film screening, film open mic in Richmond, Virginia. You just show up every month and just bring a film, and you can screen your film in front of an audience.
I know the people who ran that.
Yeah, you were one of the people who ran it. Joe that's how we met. That's
really how we met.
Joe would host the screenings for a while, and there was something just like, I made it a goal to make a film every month, and I would just have an idea, grab a camera, get my friends together, and make a film. And that's the first clip that we showed was from one of those films, starring my buddy Carlton Forbes, who's in the audience. That I want to shout out.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Boom. He's supposed to be my De Niro. We're supposed to be collaborating for forever, but he decided to become a lawyer.
That's
a much
awesome.
steadier job.
He still looks exactly the same.
He does.
That's amazing.
It's great. But, I think going to Project Res and having the ability to, like, make a thing, like, just without just have an idea, make it, and then screen it and see what worked and what didn't work.
Do you think that, because that was actually like Project Res, even to me, I'm biased at this point, but the energy that surrounded that, like the welcoming of like, hey, this is where you can show stuff. You don't have to, and also you got to remember, that was, I feel like, I don't know if Cooney might know, if that was on the cusp of like the digital age too.
It was on the cusp, it was that weird in-between place where it's like.
Was there YouTube at that point?
There was no YouTube. So it was like before, it was like, we had mini DV tapes and like DVD burners. So it was like kind of like the beginning of digital. And like the very like when Panasonic had like the HVX or whatever that thing was called, that started going digital, but it was like before YouTube. So you had the ability to make stuff easier than you did before. You had Final Cut Studio and all of that, but then you didn't have like the outlet that was YouTube to screen things. So it was like kind of in that really amazing sweet spot. And the thing that I love about like, because now you can make a thing, throw it on YouTube. People can watch it, comments, whatever, but there's nothing like watching something with an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. That energy, that like combined energy is such an amazing thing. I always felt like when you show anything on the screen with an audience, this is like a live performance we're watching now. We are watching this live. Just like how I, all the stuff that's happening in there and that in the other room, like all that stuff is live. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
So I always really enjoyed that. That was actually my next question was like, do you think in today's world, is this stuff like YouTube, is stuff like TikTok, anything, because now we have that bombardment of, I hate the word, content.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's sort of like, I feel like content, and me personally, is like content has no soul. It's a filler. You know what I mean? But do you think, is it sort of damaging the communal experience, or is it just that's the new generation and that they don't really care about that?
I mean, I don't want to be like
I don't
want to be all like get off my lawn about it, but I do think that there's something that's missed about from the communal experience, because like my early films were were mostly comedies, and so you watch a comedy with an audience, if something works or doesn't. There's a metric you can apply, of like, did they laugh or did they not? Did the joke work or did it not? And you can go to fix it. It's like building a stand-up set, right? Like that's how I viewed the early days of my filmmaking. But even when I started making dramas, you can feel the energy of people responding to what you're putting on the screen. Like there is a communal aura or energy that's at play that I think is being missed by filmmakers who are kind of coming up and cutting their teeth now, where it's like, that's how I found my voice. That's how I found what worked and what didn't work. As a filmmaker, your job is to communicate to your audience, and you have an intention, and then you communicate, and you have something that you try. I'm going to try this. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if what I'm intending to get across is going to come across. The only way you can find that out is if you show someone and then talk to them about it. What did you get out of it? Did my intention come across? And if it didn't, figuring out why it was, and then applying that to the next thing you make, or if you have a chance to re-edit or reshoot the thing that you're making, applying it there. And I think, now with like the digital world, you throw something on YouTube, yes, you'll get the likes, you'll get the comments, you'll get like the most watched parts and all those metrics, but you don't get that human interaction of, oh, this is what I felt. This is and even feeling what that is.
But
so
even like the likes and the comments, and you see that, but that's still in a way you just know that could be fake too.
It could absolutely be fake, and it's kind of a throwaway as well. It's like I'm scrolling through, oh, that's cool, double tap, next thing. Right, as opposed to sitting in a theater, lights go down, sitting with the piece, watching it, and then sitting with that feeling for a second and letting it kind of permeate, and then going, and then from there having that conversation.
And then that's actually like, in a way, not to put myself forward, but that was part of the promotion of this film festival. I was like, you can't click away.
Yeah,
you're here in the theater. You're here to enjoy all this, and that's such a great component of this experience.
Yeah,
and here's one thing. Okay, I'll bring it back. So, Finding Forrester.
Yep.
I don't watch that and I'm like, oh, that's a comedy, right?
No.
So where does that come from in your work? What were you drawn from? Yeah, like
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
This is what I thought. In real life, I was like, you're either Fresh Prince or you're Zach Morris. Like you make that life choice for that generation. I hope people saw that show, any of those shows. Yeah. Like it's serious. I was like, that's you're this or that.
I rewatched over the pandemic. I rewatched The Fresh Prince from like beginning to end, and I was
like with the original on Vib.
Original into the second Aunt Vib, who's Daphne, who ran the movie studio. Who's shout out to Daphne Reed, my film godmother, and I was blown away at how much of my sense of humor was derived from that show. I was like,
it's hilarious though.
I was cracking up at everything as if it was the first time seeing it, and it was like that weird kind of thing of watching something that you hadn't seen in a while and just seeing the roots and the DNA that have like kind of just implanted in you so deeply that you didn't even realize that, like where they came from, and like that was it. Another one is Hollywood Shuffle.
Yes.
Like if you've seen Slave Cry and you've seen Hollywood Shuffle, like I didn't even know I was doing it, but like I watched Hollywood Shuffle when I was in high school, and I was like, this is a groundbreaking, incredible film. Robert Townsend is a genius, and I'm so glad he's like having kind of this like kind of mini revival now. But he's been working like nonstop anyway. But like I watched it in high school, and it was like one of my favorite films. And then I went and made Slave Cry, and then I rewatched Hollywood Shuffle. And I was like, man, I was really pulling from that movie, to tell this story.
But there's a certain point where when you pull things from things that you enjoy, that's still your life that you're pulling from.
Oh, for sure. And it's still my lens. It's still my prism of like my experience with that thing and how much I related to that, and then using that lens to tell the story of like my personal experience. So it's kind of giving it a framework to fill with my own personal,
Yeah, because you lived through it.
Exactly.
I mean, you were there.
Exactly.
There was one thing I want to actually go out on a limb and thank you for something. Okay. And this is this may be very trivial to you, and I'm going to bring a little history back to us.
Okay.
So I used to produce a show for RVA TV called House Show, in which we would go to venues. Me and my multi-camera crew would go to venues, and we would film concerts and stuff like that. I called it like concert film and a crash TV. That has nothing to do with the story. But one time after one of the shoots, my car got towed.
Yeah.
It got pulled away, literally right in front of me.
Yeah.
Literally right in front of me. And I'm always going to thank you and for just being a friend in this situation, that you're like this. Don't worry, let's go over there and get it. And then we went to the who are the people who pick up the cars?
The tow truck.
Yeah, we went to the
impound.
Yeah, we went to the impound, right? And taking consideration, I think I'm a tough guy. But I'm not really. No, I am. Yeah. But so like, me and you. Well, first you led in there. You're like, we can get your car back, Joe. We go with the guy. A tough Southern gentleman. I was like, do you have a problem? Like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I think you guys got my car. You step in front. It's like, yeah, you got Joe's car. We want it back. And I was like, Calvin. I called you Calvin back then.
Yeah.
He's like, I was like, dude, he has like a big gun, dude. He's like, it doesn't matter. You weren't supposed to take his gun. And you're like, but the simple fact that there are very few people in my life that have actually stood in front of a person who has a gun to get my car back. And I'd like to just say, like, thanks, man. There's those moments I remember in that. You're
welcome.
And I tried to, and to bring it back to film, in the story of life, I always look for inside these moments, like everyone's film, I look for these moments of like, this is why I think you're an awesome friend, because you did that. This is why it's great. And when I watch people's films, like, you look for that moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I always feel like every one of your films has that moment that you take away from. Is there a film that you're a fan of beyond Finding Forrester that you're embarrassed to say, like, you're like, this is one of my most important films?
Embarrassed to say?
Yeah.
Like, why would, no.
Like I always say, well, for me, I'm always like, oh, everyone's like, how did you get into film? What was your biggest inspiration? And I'm always so shy, but I say it anyway because I love entertaining people, to say, like, my favorite, the main thing that got me into making movies is Dawson's Creek. And everyone's all like, really, that CW show, that teen drama?
It launched a whole network.
Yeah,
like,
but
it launched so many careers. Like,
yeah,
why like.
Yeah, but I was in 10th grade, man.
I don't know, man. Like, I kind of rail against the concept of, like, quote unquote guilty pleasures, because, like, I feel like there are so many things that just have merit to them.
Yeah.
Like, on their own, of like, even if it's just entertaining, it's entertaining. Like, and that's the point. Like, it's giving you a brief respite from the constant, like, getting kicked by the world, you know. So if I want to go home and put on Three Ninjas, then that's what I'm going to go home and do. That's my answer to your question.
Three Ninjas kick back. You know what?
Ninjas. I love Three Ninjas. Also, Step Up to The Streets. It's a great film. It's a great martial arts film.
What?
Good dance movies are just basically martial arts films, right? It's like the dance sequences are fight sequences. They've always got to, like, save the dance studio / the dojo. It's like all the same thing. Like, someone's getting revenge because someone got served, and you got to go and get revenge on the person that served them. It's like, if you look at anything through the right lens, you can find it, like, genuine, proper enjoyment from it. So I don't believe in, like, a guilt. Like, there's nothing, like, I'm really embarrassed to say has influenced me. Like,
you're here today because of that.
Because of the weird mix mash of stuff that I grew up watching, you know. And
but you know, there is that type of filmmaker in a way, not in a way, but there is a type of filmmaker where they have to have the checkbox clicked of, like, this is what makes you, like, a real filmmaker. You like Kubrick, you like Aronofsky. Yeah. What's another, like, dark? Lynch. You like David Lynch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but that's what makes you unique.
Those guys are great too.
Yeah.
Like, I pull from everything. Like, that's my thing. Also, just that story you told earlier, like I'm just my mom's watching this this live stream. I was imagining. I don't know if she knew that part of the story. I don't know if I remember that part of the story. If I just like blacked it out because I was like, this is very dangerous. But I was very outraged because they stole your car.
I was right
there. We were standing there.
I was like
we had loaded the equipment into your car, and you locked your keys in the car, and you couldn't figure out how to like that, and then they towed it.
No. The thing is, though, and you made fun of me for this, but I was probably, I don't know, maybe other people's. This is when you have like the keypad.
Yeah, I never used that.
I used that.
I know you did.
Because that's why the keys were in the car.
That's why I made fun of you about it.
That's why the keys were in the car.
Moving on. What's next? No one wants to hear
Can I jump to present time? Am I allowed to jump about present projects, but no without speaking, or can I talk?
Sure, yeah, like I can,
So here's the thing that I tried to like, from can we say the name?
Yeah, Superman Lois.
All right. So here's the thing: when you're writing Superman Lois, right, and knowing your history of your cinematic, your writing history.
Yes.
And I was watching, I was like, that's a J type scene. Like there's that back and forth, that comedy back. I was like, that's that type of conversation. That's sort of like the quick wit. I was like, wait, that wasn't on the show before. There it is. Can you tell us, are there like those moments where you're like, this is actually, I just took this literally from what I've always wanted, like, is this pure a J moment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. There are a lot of like random things like that. I mean, the way the writer's room works is, it's very, very collaborative, right? It's like we'll get in there and you'll toss around ideas so many times that oftentimes you will forget where it originated because everyone's iterated on it, and it's like it becomes the room's idea, and then it gets filtered through the actual writer's voice to like when they write it, and then the showrunners like will do their pass to like kind of smooth everything over, but like. What's beautiful about it is that seed, like when you kind of create that alchemy and put that team together of those writers, there are aspects that kind of pop out from like certain writers, right? Like there are certain things that you bring from your own life or things that you always wanted to do. And so there was an episode last season where Lois and her father get kidnapped and tied up. And there's like, it's like my favorite like exchange between Lois and her dad, where like he's struggling against the ropes or whatever, and Lois is like, yeah, no, don't do that. Like that's a certain kind of knot. It's only gonna get tighter the more you struggle. No, if it was a fireman's knot, you could like get out of it. But because of this, that, and the other, and he's like, how many times have you been tied up? Like just playing with the idea that like, calling into the history of like Lois as just someone who just sticks her nose in things that always winds up in her being endangered and tied up and Superman having to come in. It's just kind of something I like to do a lot is I'm very interested in like kind of like the meta nature of story and bringing in what I call narrative momentum, which is like all of the things that the audience knows and all of the things that are surrounding the character when you come into the story, and using that momentum to either pull the audience further or by like what I call narrative jujitsu, where you like flip them. So it's like you pull them one way thinking that it's going to be something, and then you totally flip what the scenario is. And it's the idea that very rarely is something that I'm writing or made going to be the very first thing the audience is ever going to see. So the idea is like you're pulling in what people's expectations are and using that to more effectively tell your story. And so in that instance, it was just, I don't know, it was a funny moment. I remembered exactly where I was when I wrote it, which is like I was like in the Glendale library, because I'm a writer who like I pop around. I go to coffee shops. I go to libraries. I don't have like a single set place. I have to go places, which was really difficult for my process.
But is that how the workflow is? So you don't have to actually be like in one set spot where like in the like, is that how the structure is? Like you guys can just go anywhere and write.
I almost can't be in one. Oh, you mean like when working on the show? Yeah. When you're on script, you just go off and write. Okay. So you can go. You can go into the office, or you can go wherever, and then you just turn in your pages whenever the showrunner says you need to turn your pages in.
But you can't do one spot. You have to hop. You have to sightsee, right?
I really, truly, like I have to like go different places and have different energy and move around, and yeah, it's a whole thing. Which
See, it's a unique thing talking about that structure, even though I'm afraid to mention his name now, but like I remember Joss Whedon, right? He would say like it inspires him, he has to go to the set and then he can find the story. Is that something you've had to do with any one of your films? You're like, I need to go here, I need to. Because I remember today you're trying to find inspiration around DC.
Yeah, which is definitely helpful. Going on artist dates and whatnot, like just to get the change of energy, just to look around and experience things and meet folks. It's useful. I think when writing and directing, going to set. I remember season 1 we weren't allowed to go to set because of the pandemic. And so then when we were able to go season 2 to produce our episodes.
But would they just send you there? If you could, like, you're like, I want to just go to set. They're like, yeah, here's a ticket, go. Or do you actually have to like pay your way?
No. When you go to produce your episode, they send you to go and they put you up and it's a whole thing. But season 1, because of like they were like all the protocols and whatnot, they only sent like 2 EPs, that kind of switched off to cover set. So when I finally went to set, it helped me learn because it's like, oh, this is how these sets are laid out. So this thing I was writing where like they turn and look at this thing just never worked. It's like because of the layout and so that helped. And it also from a directing standpoint, I'm very much someone who I have to be on set to envision the shots. Like I can kind of pre-plan, but a lot of it comes when I go to set early or the day before or whatever, and I can kind of be in the space and see how things are going to kind of like lay out. And that's...
So I remember like Kevin Smith would talk about when he was directing like episodes of Supergirl, right? And he would say like, yeah, I just sort of showed up and like everyone just, like he was like, this is like the easiest job ever. Was it when you directed stuff, did you feel like you were as hands-on or was like the machine already like in place and you're like, oh, I guess I just point to that and they do it?
I mean,
in comparison, I guess, to everything you've done.
I will say I had a massive episode, so it was I was thankful for the machine and for the help of everyone, but I did have to kind of come in and like figure out how we were going to do the set pieces and kind of have a general vision and a general idea of like the tone, pacing, how we're going to maneuver things. I was fortunate because I know the show. I've written on it since day one. So I know knew the cast and the crew, so they all kind of put on their A game to help me, direct the thing. But yeah, no, it was definitely something where I had to. It was a lot of planning and pre-production to kind of get things going.
So I guess people might wonder this: is there actually a set way to get to the spot that you're in to work on a show like that, or is it just like, do you think it was just like chance, or that you were in here, the right spot, and you met this right person?
So what's interesting is I think I saw something recently, and I wish I had like marked it so I could like accredit it to whomever. But there's this concept of a lot of this industry, a lot of breaking in is luck. It's like be right place, right time. But it's also being ready when those opportunities present themselves, and it's also increasing your opportunities for the luck to present itself. So they used a reference of like fishing, and there's like a way where it's like you could put like a line into the water, or you could put a net. I think there may have been something, but like this is the general idea where it's like, okay, well, either way, you might not catch any fish, but one thing is going to kind of give you a broader opportunity to get lucky, And so a lot of my prep in my career was trying to create as many opportunities to get lucky as possible, and then hopefully being ready when those opportunities presented themselves. I used to listen to I still do. There's a podcast called the Nerdist Writers Panel.
Yeah.
I think it's like, if you're interested in writing for television, it's a must listen. It's a television writer, Ben Blacker, who interviews other television writers about the craft, about, their process. And for a lot of the episodes, he will interview them about how they broke in. Like, what was their breaking in story? And I would listen to those a lot when I was like in the process of trying to break in. And the thing that he cautions is every single story is different, but there are commonalities. There are similarities. There are things that people did that kind of put them in the position to kind of get there. You know, things like the way that you interact with people in network, the way, like the types of spec scripts and samples that you're writing, you know, the way that you go about the process and go about the work that puts you in a better position to succeed and to break in. Doesn't mean you're going to, but there are kind of some best practices that you can start applying to your life that allow that might increase that opportunity, that might cast a wider net for that luck. And so that's what I did, you know, is I would listen to those. I would just try to take the nuggets that I could and apply that, you know, to my career.
That's awesome. I'm going to take a little moment. Did you guys get a raffle? Anyone get a raffle ticket yet? No? But can you send Anvik just to remind about, so what we have as part of a special part of the raffle is also Jay has signed 3 issues of Creed that he wrote, and the winner of the raffle will get those, plus other stuff too. But I think that's a really awesome thing. So jumping back in.
Yep.
So now, this is one thing we can also hopefully bond on, because now you're writing comics too.
Yes.
I've always told people there's actually a strategic difference of writing comics and scripts. And I don't know if you realize this or if you found out too, but I find myself when I'm writing comics, it's way different because I find myself, I have to write for the page turn. What are the things that you learned from going from script writing to being in the comic book writing process?
Yeah, it was way more difficult than I thought it was going to be for me. Yeah,
well, go ahead.
I have basically not written anything outside of screenplays and maybe the occasional short essay in like 15 years. Like, that's the way that I write now. You know, even if I'm writing like a short story or a treatment, it's like in cinematic. I write. That's how I think.
Yeah.
That's that. And so when I was writing comics, it's one of those things where it's like a different muscle, because you're right. I'm writing the scene of the comic, and I'm like, oh, but wait, like when I would write, they would walk over here. It's like I have to pick where they are at each step.
Yeah.
Or do a special panel where they're walking or whatever. So it just took an extra step for me of like processing. It's almost like I had to translate. I had to like write a scene and then translate it to comics form.
Because there's some things that just don't work in a comic form.
Exactly. It's like when I went one time I went with my sister to do we went to the gym, and you know I'm normally like trying to like bench press, and I was like,
how much?
I was like in really good shape.
Like
this was when I was like
350?
No, not 350, but this was when I was like pushing 300.
What?
Like, I was like getting close to 300. Listen.
That's one of the things Cooney said down here. He was like, I think Jay's getting bulked up, man.
I
don't know.
But no, like this was back in the day. But like I was strong, right?
Yeah.
And so I went with my sister to this like one of her workout classes, and it was like one of those like there's an instructor and there's like light weights, but you're doing like a lot of reps, and you're like kind of doing different moves. And I was like, oh, I got this. And I go in, and it's like there are muscles that I haven't used
the new muscle
in forever, and like just like the little guy that's like right here, that's like, you know, and you're like, I didn't even know that muscle was there, and it was like I was very sore, and it was like tough, and like and never like
because these have been neglected.
Yeah, and these old ladies are looking at me like laughing, and I'm like, listen, you got me, you know. And that's what comic book writing felt like, where it's like muscles that like I wasn't used to using.
But this was something you also want. Like, did you want to write comics? Like when you're was that an option?
Yeah, no, for sure. You know what's interesting? I've spoken about this recently, but. Like when I got the opportunity to do the Creed, and before that I did a comic book tie-in for the Superman and Lois show.
Yeah, like
that was my first,
the Earth One, like
Earth Prime. And you know, and it was one of those things where for me growing up, because I loved comic books, it was like one of the first things.
You still do, right?
I still do, but like that was what kind of got me into storytelling for sure, was comic books, novels. And I remember the great classics where it's like abridged versions of like the Robinson family,
Yeah.
Caruso, and like Frankenstein with like little pictures in it. And I was like, whatever. But so all of that stuff, that's like, I love that stuff. But growing up, becoming a filmmaker was more possible in my mind than becoming a comic book writer in like this weird way, because I had met Tim Reed and Daphne Reed, who and they were like, oh yeah, I could do that, but I didn't know any comic book writers when I was growing up, and so that seemed like such a further throw to and like I was like, oh well, I can't do that, like, but I can do that, like I know Tim, like,
Yeah.
you know, and I see what he's done, and you can make a living where like as a filmmaker where you're not necessarily like the top person that's like whatever, but like you're making a consistent living directing commercials or directing shorts or directing movies, or you know, running the studio or doing whatever, like, and so that's I don't know, it's one of those things where I realized how important representation is, you know, like as like growing up in Richmond, seeing like a black man build a studio and make films, like that was so important for me to see what was possible, you know, where it was like, oh, okay, I can, it's hard. It's going to be a long road, but it's possible, you know? So
What's unique though is it's a very I wouldn't say it's a common story, but I don't know if you know Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance. So it's a big rock and roll band. So he wanted to start out. He started out as wanting to be a comic book artist.
Oh wow!
And so he was you know, like Xeroxing for Marvel and DC, but they would never give him like a chance to do a penciler. So you know, he created the band My Chemical Romance. You know, becomes a huge star, right? Becomes a huge rock and roll star, and then once that ended, towards the end of it, he pitched to Dark Horse like, "Hey, you think I can do a comic?" And then they're like, "Yeah," and like it's weird. He had to go through this to be a big, massive
This
rock and
whole
roll
bit,
star
yeah.
to literally come back down to do like the original dream that he really wanted to do.
Yeah, it's such a
Now, I know you're talking about editing your sister Spencer's film.
Yes.
And this is one thing I don't know if you realize this, as also now making comics, that I find like learning, since you have to like you're basically cutting on the page on
Yeah.
comic books. Has
Yeah.
that helped you with your editing? Because I always tell people, it's like, you should try to think about that, because now the more comics writings I've done, I've been like, actually, I know what shots I need now because I've done this before. Has that affected your filmmaking?
I mean, I feel like, yes. This is one of the things, too, that goes back to just making stuff. Like my central theme, like when I talk to filmmakers and folks come up, is like, just make stuff and get involved in as many creative pursuits as possible, because every aspect of the creative process will help every other aspect of the creative process. So, like, when I was making films at Project Res, I would write, direct, shoot, edit, do the sound mix, you know, and each time I would learn something that helped all of the other aspects. So like when I wrote something, I'd get there and I'd be directing it, and I'm like, what idiot wrote this? Like, this isn't going to work, you know, and I'd have to like, and so I would file that away. Then I get in the edit and I'm like, who directed this? I don't have all the shots I need, but like, and I'd file that away. And so then when I went back around and did it again, I knew a little bit more about what each stage of the process needed to make a full piece. So when I was coming up, I just thought of myself as a filmmaker. I wasn't like a writer, director, or whatever. I just like made the thing. And then I started like, because of Project Res, I met people and I was able to collaborate with like other filmmakers who were better at, you know, being cinematographers than I ever would be. You know?
I remember one time when we were talking about comics, you're like, Joe, I'm thinking about making a comic book too, and I want you to draw it. And I was like, Jay, I don't draw.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we have at least 10 more minutes, but I want to open it up that anyone in the audience has a question, and we can field that as best as we can. Does anyone? There you go.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
I have a question about directing. So what is it like transitioning from doing state crime narrative film to directing Superman and
Okay. The question was about directing and transitioning from like doing my own films into doing like episodic television.
Like, is it a different monster from what
I
you're
mean,
used to?
yeah. I mean, just
Well,
the
they're all
scale.
monsters.
The scale alone was like that was the biggest thing. I think was the scale of the thing. You know, it's like you go from very small running gun films into like something that's like a massive machine and like millions of dollars that you're responsible for. But you know, I think the core of it is storytelling, right? It's like it's each opportunity you get, you tell the story. I remember I had the opportunity to shadow on a couple of different like television episodes before I've shadowed on like Turn and Homeland, and I remembered shadowing on Turn, and there was something that always stuck with me where there was an actor working with the director, and they're working their way through the scene, and on each beat, the actor, they're kind of in the discussion, and they'll say, okay, so this tells that story. Like, if we move here, like, I'll hold the thing like this, like the prop. So I'll tell that story, and then I'll look over there, and I'll tell that story, and then we could come over here, and I was like, oh, it's like a film is just a collection of little mini stories that create, like each beat is a story, it's a moment, it's a thing, and you just create, and then you just build and you create from there. And I think if you're able to kind of break it down to those blocks, and it's all about communicating your vision to tell like each beat. And the thing is like all it is on the television episode, it's just a lot more beats with like, and they're bigger beats, you know. It's like, okay, instead of telling the story of like someone who wants to read comic books instead of working and he's just at his desk or whatever, I've got to tell the story of a supervillain who is terrorizing a city, and Superman flies into the air to try to find out where they are. But there, it still is like each beat has its story, and if you can communicate that to the department heads, they help you. You know, it's like that's the key thing is just communicating your vision to your cinematographer, to your visual effects supervisor, to the production designer, to the props master, to the actors, communicating your vision as best you can, and then they take it and run with it. And because that's what their job is, and they're all incredible at their jobs. And the end result is, you know, something great. But it's the same, you know, again, the working out analogy, it's the same muscles, you're just like lifting more, but you also have more spotters to help you. So,
Any other questions?
Actually, I got a really easy one.
okay.
So, the lead who plays Superman, Tyler, what's the correct pronunciation of it?
Tyler Hecklin.
Hecklin. Damn. I was
Yeah.
going to guess that.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the question.
Tyler Hecklin.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's great. He's my favorite Superman. I'm not just saying that. He's legitimately my favorite Superman.
Any other questions before I turn to up there?
Then you were a staff writer for Superman. How long did it take for you to be able to direct episodes? And did it take like certain selling on your part to, you know, to prove that you could direct like episodic television? Or what was that process like to be able to direct your first Superman episode?
Yeah, for sure. So I was hired as a staff writer, and then each year I got promoted. So season 2, I was a story editor. Season 3, I was an executive story editor. That's when I directed.
Wait, how did that happen, though? Is there a story behind the promotion?
It's kind of one of those things where generally, sometimes they have you repeat. That's part of why we're striking. WGA strong. Hopefully,
That's right.
we will have some good news soon. But like, yes, thank you. I'll take the. But you know, generally, you know, if a show continues on each year, you know, like you move up. You know, if you're asked back, you know, there are circumstances where sometimes you might have to repeat a step, you know, one year, but you know, you generally are able to move up. For that show, in my interview with Todd, who's the showrunner, I mentioned the fact that I was interested in directing. He read a spec script of mine that made its way to him that he enjoyed. thought I would be a good fit for the show. We had a phone interview because I was actually in Richmond, like when that interview was happening. So we just hopped on the phone. He talked about his vision for the show. I talked about my background. I mentioned that I was also interested in directing. I didn't say it as like kind of like, you know, you better let me direct. Or, you know, it was very much like, hey, this is something I'm interested in. I know probably not season 1, maybe not even season 2, but like at some point, and it would be great if I could, you know, be in extra meetings, you know, shadow, like whatever. And he remembered that. And then also, like when I was in the room, I was often like I would bring my directing background into the pitches. So I would pitch, oftentimes I would pitch cinematic stuff, or I would pitch, you know, there was one point where Brent, our other showrunner, was like, he was pitching something. He was like, yeah, and then this will happen, and this time, then we'll do something like really cool cinematic battle sequence. I'm looking at you, Jay. And I was like, okay, I'll figure something out, you know, like, and so
But that's what you're saying. Be ready.
Be ready. And the thing is like, I often I referred to myself as a writer-director. Like I considered myself a writer-director. When I was a visual effects assistant on Turn, I was still a writer-director. I did as much work on my own as I could. And people saw me as a writer-director like for the entirety of my career. It's like, it's kind of how you present yourself and how you view yourself that people kind of take that and run with it. So
That's the pro wrestling term. Perception is reality.
Exactly. So when I pitched that to Todd was like, cool, he remembered it. I kind of proved myself like in the process that I had like some sort of cinematic vision. I directed shorts before, and so when the time came, season 2 I shadowed, and then before season 3 he sponsored me I guess sponsored me for the Warner Brothers Directing Fellowship, which was kind of a segue into getting an episode of the show. And that was a really great program that just kind of was a crash course in episodic television, like how to prep, how to work with actors, what happens when curveballs come your way. You're working with real actors. You're working with, it's taught by 2 directors who have like directed hundreds of episodes. They've seen everything. They've directed every type of genre, and literally written the book on directing television was who teaches this course. And so that definitely prepared me, but it was very much me going in kind of humbly and just saying, hey, this is something I'd like to do. Like, and then following through, I would sit in on extra meetings. I would come with, cinematic directing pitches. I would, kind of position myself as a director in his eyes. And he was, he was happy to support me in that.
But you brought up another awesome thing that I think not a lot of people realize sometimes is the idea of shadowing someone.
Yeah.
Like really, before you mentioned it, like that wasn't even something that's in my mind. You're like, oh wait, so you can shadow these people. What is the process where people don't know? How did you present, like, hey, can I shadow you? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult because it is like it's often an official position where it's like you're a part of the crew. So you either have to know a director who will try to bring you in or know someone who's like the producing director. Usually on a show, the producing director will help place shadows on a show, either that or the showrunner. And it's something where, like, that's where some of the networking comes in. I was able to shadow on Turn because I was a visual effects assistant on season 2, and then after season 2, I had the opportunity to go direct a feature. So I missed season 3 because of, like, I was finishing the feature and doing all of that. But in that time period, at the end of season 2, I got to know the showrunner of Turn, and was able to kind of pick his brain and like build a little bit of a rapport. So when the time came for season 4, I was like, hey, I'd love to shadow you. And then he was like, hey, yeah, that's cool. And then I just kind of kept bugging him until he was like, okay, yeah, like here, I got this, this slot for you.
But that's the same thing where it's like, you drop the ideas in people's heads.
Yeah,
That's how
it's all incepting
Yeah.
stuff. Like you've got to incept your career, right? Like you've got to like for yourself and for like the universe. I'm big on like my sister like manifesting, like and like kind of putting stuff out there in a way that like it comes back to you, right?
But also, it's also like, you're not going to get what you don't ask for.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
and people they won't know unless you tell them sometimes.
Exactly.
Too.
Like people need to know how to help you.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's another thing. When I was like in the process of like moving to LA and trying to get into the industry, I was like, oh, I would be happy being a writer or a director or what. And I had a conversation with someone who's a director, and he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do a lot of stuff. He's like, okay, but like, I don't know how to help you if you don't know what to ask for. And so you need to like kind of, it's fine. Like once you're in, you can kind of start expanding out, but like you need to figure out a way that you can you can have specific asks. And so that was the point. I was like, okay, well, I'm moving to LA. I want to do television at the time. Like my priority is television and television writing.
I mean, television is great.
Television is great. And for me, it was like, it's the closest thing to a 9 to 5 while you're still being creative, like super creative, like in the industry.
That's what I was thinking. That's actually what I want to do up here.
I
want to have that. I was like, that'd be awesome.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Like a writer's room because I have colleagues and like we hang out. We're on a text thread and it's like we can. I love television writing, but I also want to do all this other stuff. But so that's when I was like, okay, I'm a writer who directs, and that's when I became focused on like, if I get a television job, then that will open the door for me to possibly direct episodes of television, which will open the door for me to direct features and write features and do, which so far it's like done a good job. Like the plan is working, but it was when I focused in on like creating that kind of wedge pivot point of like, I want to be a writer. Let me wedge my way in the door and then like crack that bad boy open all the way.
I have one more question, but first we're gonna do the raffle. Can you hand me, or unless do you want to pull the number?
No, you can pull the number. I'll pull the number. Sure. There's 3 of them, right?
No, just one.
Just one?
Just all. They're gonna get them all.
Oh, they're gonna get all 3?
Yeah, they're getting this awesome bag full of goodies.
Okay, great. Okay, the number is 398-7851.
Did you get it, Matt? No. Anyone have that?
51.
If no one has it, we're going to get to the next one.
Nelson?
Does he have it? Oh, so he gets
It's incredible.
He just walks.
Nelson.
So he wins that one. All right. Final question. We're going to end it with this. I thought this was going to be. Does he deserve that?
Yeah. Nelson used to DJ my house parties when I was in grad school. I threw crazy house parties when I was in grad school. It was yeah.
It's a good days when you were at AU over there.
Oh, it was
that house. That house.
Oh, you came by that house.
Oh yeah.
That house.
Oh yeah.
Incredible.
We filmed so much in that house. We filmed at every floor of that house.
We did.
I filmed with everyone else there was making films too. It was a filmmaking house.
It was a filmmaking house. We had like a whole house full of like grad students, and Joe would just come in and like help us make all our films. It was great.
Okay, so I want to ask you this last, but take this question super serious.
Okay.
So, last question of the night.
Yep.
Jay Jamison, what is your superpower?
I think it's. I have 2.
What?
You can't just have like one superpower. Like what?
X-Men only have one power each, right? You can't combine.
No, man. They had the secondary mutations. Emma Frost got the.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, telepathic, and then she turns to diamond. Like,
yeah, but the island of Genosha, they killed all of them.
I'm Grant Morrison X-Men. That's
dude, I am. That's what I want. I wanted to be the Grant Morrison of filmmaking.
Yeah.
I was like, all right.
I think they might be. I think you know what? I think they're all related. It's just different versions of it. I think it's connection. because the two things I was thinking about was empathy and analogies.
Analogy is a superpower.
I think I do good analogy. I dropped a few tonight, and I was like, oh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I just, and it's the way my brain works. It's like I think interesting connections, and I think that's true of like my filmmaking, but of like me as a, like it's very. I feel for other people. I can like understand where people come from, and I think it's through making interesting connections, whether they're thematically or conceptually or whatever. So if I were to like kind of just, especially like from a storytelling filmmaking standpoint, like I think that's the thing that I bring to, you know, my work. And like when I'm in a room, that's try to come at it from like a very thematic standpoint and all of that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Before we wrap up though, I have a few things that I wanted to.
This is your space, sir. This is your space.
Thank you. No, I was just thinking about. I was just thinking about like it was interesting. So I showed that retrospective, and it was like my first like real. I made like one other film as like a class project that also starred my friend Carlton, but like that was my first film that I showed that was like kind of like my coming out party almost at Project Res, where it was just like, here is me at this point. And then I did my demo reel, which is like kind of a bunch of stuff and then the last film was like the culmination of what I'd done up until that point. And it was really interesting looking back at like that journey. And one of the things I talk about with filmmakers or whomever is like how important it is. And I say this a lot because I have to remind myself of how important it is to like kind of look at where you've come from. Because I know for me, I'm so focused on like, what's the next goal? What's the next achievement? What's the next thing that I can go after that I forget where I've come from and like what I've done. And it reminds me, you know, so you need like, it's the thing I always think about is it's mountain climbing, right? You know, and there's always going to be another mountain and you're always going to want to make it move. It will always be an uphill battle, Joe. And sometimes you're going to lose. It's not about how fast you get there. It's not about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. And that's what I want to end with. It's the process.
It's the process. That's right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Jay, thank you so much for coming out here.
Thank you for having me.
I had blast. So that's it. We don't, I mean.
Oh, do we want to announce that, or are we going to announce that at the award ceremony?
Oh, we should. Is there any executives here at this moment? Or are we going to announce it? But we should do it now. We're live.
Oh, yeah, we're live.
We're live. So, you guys, whoever's going to the award ceremony, if there's any filmmakers here, Jay has an announcement for.
Yeah. So as part of the film festival, my involvement with it, the winners of all the categories will get. I will do a 30-minute consultation on a project with you, whether it's like a script or film or whatever, and we'll set it up via Zoom, and yeah, or career consultation or whatever you want to talk. If you just want to get on and bitch about your life or whatever, that's cool too. I don't, but yeah, it's just for me, it's the same thing as there were so many people who were responsible for me being able to do what I'm doing now that I want to do my best to help the next group of folks who are
give back
along and give back, and so
let's make it official.
Boom.
Done. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. We have 2 more days of the festival. It only gets more crazier from here.